Wait a second. This isn't your grandma's cancer show.
Not your grandma's cancer show.
I'm Tatum, and today we're talking about that time when treatment is over and friends and family are so relieved that they say things like, "You're all good now, right?" Which isn't really a question, because you don't want to burst that bubble of letting them believe everything's okay, but actually you might be left with lasting effects of your treatment. And it can be really tough knowing how to process that and where and who to talk to. So I have two amazing guests with me today. I've got Matt, who was 17 when they were diagnosed with brain tumours, and they've changed over time, because that's 7 years ago now, how they've coped, how they've looked at their diagnosis, how they deal with their day-to-day now. And with me, I've got Roisin, who was 28 when she was diagnosed. And Roisin, can you tell me what was happening in your life at that time?
Yeah, I was sort of navigating working in hospitality during the pandemic, which was sort of immediately before diagnosis. I've been working in bars, restaurants and clubs, very lively settings, and that just fell to nothing really. So just working in coffee shops, then I kind of was studying at the same time, so I would just do part-time work and went to home studying, and would have to learn how to navigate online, how to get through my uni work. So studying business. And I loved it. I loved the kind of part-time work. I loved the studying. I lived alone at the time. I had sort of a lot of independence, full flat to myself. I loved all that as well. Obviously until COVID, when it became a lot more isolating. But yeah, I would get out for cycles quite often as well during lockdown, and that was really my kind of go-to fitness. And just, I did get to a point then where I started to feel like I was in a bit of pain or a bit of distress, and I didn't know if that was due to COVID fatigue. You know, like everyone sort of had that little moment of, fed up and feeling a bit anxious. So I slowly started to lose motivation with another redundancy at work due to COVID, and my studies started to kind of suffer. And I had been in pain quite a bit, so I was on medication. We thought that was for my wisdom teeth, so I had been booked in for wisdom tooth removal at the dental hospital. Unfortunately, that was cancelled due to the pandemic. So directly before diagnosis really wasn't a pleasant time. Navigating online studying, trying to find work that I wouldn't be made redundant from, and living through a bit of pain and anxiety, really. That was, life pre-diagnosis for me.
That sounds really tough, especially as pre-COVID. It sounded like you were out and about and doing things and working in hospitality and being around a lot of people, to suddenly have your life change quite drastically. And then some of the things about COVID then masking how you were feeling. So you were getting pain, but no one was feeling that well. So it was maybe a little easier, or a little bit more, not easier to put aside, but kind of to compartmentalize it. So when did the pain get so bad that you were like, okay, I've got to go and see somebody now?
So initially, I had been living in pain for quite a bit before, and it was all around my jaw. They thought it was TMJ. They thought it was wisdom teeth. I was booked in April 2020 to have the extraction done, and I have, at the time now, I see it as a completely irrational fear of the dentist. And yeah, so I'd been asked to be sedated for the procedure. With that being cancelled, I had to then sit and sort of wait for an appointment. And then come the October 2020, I started feeling this little pea-sized lump on my jawbone. Yeah, that's when I really started to, panic, because I'm thinking, what on earth, a lump, automatically your head goes straight to the worst case scenario. So that's when I started getting in touch with the dental hospital again and my GP. I had several doctors sort of fully PPE'd up, checking my face out, and none of them could quite place what they thought it was. So I'd be sent in for x-rays, and they were trying to do like needle biopsies from inside my mouth. They wisdom teeth, thinking that could remedy the pain and the lump. But unfortunately that didn't, and I was put on quite a long course of antibiotics. One wouldn't work and then another wouldn't work, so they'd switch that. That kind of went on for about three or 4 months before the diagnosis. So yeah, I'd also contacted my GP to say that I was just generally feeling very unwell and my anxiety was through the roof. And I had been already sort of on a course of sertraline for my anxiety. And my GP suggested that I bump up my medication. Maybe that would help. Maybe I was just feeling this fatigue and anxiety through this pandemic that we were all experiencing. So I guess I kind of muted my feelings a little bit to be like, right, it's not only me that's going through this, everyone's feeling this way just now. Yeah, but the pain itself was excruciating. It was it did get to a point where I couldn't ignore it any longer. And obviously the lump was a huge red flag.
It sounds like such a lot. To have that anxiety already, to have almost a base level in your body of something's not right, and to have those delays, antibiotic after antibiotic, and each time something's not working, of course, it's leading to that question of what if this is something more. When they told you your diagnosis, did they tell you at that time what they were going to do to your jaw?
Not entirely. I think because this was quite a rare situation to be in. So with osteosarcoma, it's generally a cancer that's found in the longer bones, so your arms, your legs. I just didn't fit into the kind of status quo of someone who would have osteosarcoma. And for it to be in my jaw was sort of, it was completely unheard of for my doctors anyway. They hadn't dealt with a case like it. So at that time with the diagnosis, there was a lot of uncertainty about exactly how it would go. There was a general sort of, you will need chemotherapy, you will need surgery. The extent of that surgery, we couldn't discuss at the initial appointment because we just didn't know at that point. There had to be the usual sort of multidisciplinary meetings with a few doctors and a lot of discussions and a little bit of a wait to exactly find out what was going to happen. Pre-surgery though, they made up my chemotherapy plan. So it was around a 4-week wait from diagnosis to starting chemotherapy. They had offered me the option of fertility treatment because of my age, I don't have children, and what if I did want to have children in the future, but there would be quite a significant delay on the chemotherapy if they were to do that. So I opted against it. And yeah, we started 4 weeks later on 3 different chemo drugs, just straight into the hospital and onto the conveyor belt of the NHS, really.
When did the impact knowing that the impact was going to be long lasting and long term sort of hit you?
Not for a while. I kind of went numb with the diagnosis. It's like there was this weird switch in me that just went from this anxious person I'd always known myself to be to like fight mode. All of a sudden, it's like that's when I really felt the mind and the body disconnecting. And it's a really kind of noticeable moment for me that it's like a light switch, you know. And I never really thought of the longer term. I really just went into a sort of day by day or week by week. I didn't have any expectations. I went quite numb with it, and it was definitely fight instinct, I reckon, at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people sort of that haven't had that experience don't necessarily always appreciate, that when you're in it, you are in that survival mode of whatever it's going to take to get through, whether that be numbness, whether that being so present in the moment, whether that be fighting or fawning or all those other different versions of it. And sometimes it is when treatment starts to come towards an end or start to quieten that the impact is sometimes when it becomes into the forefront. Where are you with your treatments and surgeries now?
So I have been cancer free for about 2.5 years now. Thankfully, that's the good news. And yeah, I'm still going under sort of surgeries, mostly reconstructive surgeries, to my jaw and my face. Yeah, my most recent surgery was September, and that was for a fat graft into my cheek, just to kind of give it a bit more symmetry up to the other side. But unfortunately, there's been some recent issues with that fat graft. So only in the last 2 weeks, I've been back in and out of the hospital, having little procedures done to try and sort out the infected graft. I know the listeners can't see me right now, but I have a big plaster on the side of my face, and that dressing's getting changed every 2 days at the moment. I'm also receiving some dental treatment because of the sort of major operation I had. They had to remove like a quarter of my teeth down with the right hand side of my jaw. So they're under the process of making me my dentures, and we had implants were fitted last year, but unfortunately one of them failed. So I did have teeth, and then I didn't have teeth, and then I had them again, and then I had to take them out again because this implant failed. So now we know that the implants are good, and they're making my new teeth for me. So I'm hoping,
oh my God,
within the next couple of months I'll have them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that is a huge amount of adjustment, because how you described the surgery, it affected how you breathe, how you eat, you know, and that difference between having teeth, not having teeth, like that is such a huge thing to have one day and then taken away and then come back. What I'm sensing is a real kind of you've had to be incredibly flexible and adjustable going through all of this. It seems like so many things haven't quite gone to plan.
No, I think that's the roller coasters of, as you learn throughout the journey, the roller coaster of cancer, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably best at times not to have high expectations, but also stay positive as well, not to be too low. But yeah, just keeping a kind of middle ground, because it's quite an unpredictable journey, and it can surprise you at times on both positive and negative levels, really.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So keeping with that kind of idea, what was something that surprised you that you hadn't anticipated, good or bad? A side effect perhaps that hadn't crossed your head that you might have?
My confidence during the process, which was quite astounding to me, because it's something I've never been an overly confident person. But I felt like I had a little bit more confidence. Like, I was quite happy to be outdoors and have my scars and my wounds at that point. And I was through chemotherapy. I'd lost all of my hair. I didn't really necessarily feel the need to wear a hat or a scarf. I was just kind of proud to just be alive at that moment in time, I think, and it just didn't bother me how I looked. And that was something that really struck me. So I suppose that's a positive. But I found that when my hair started growing back in, maybe public sympathy kind of dropped a little. People didn't really understand that I was going through something. So I noticed quite a difference in my confidence at that point. It started to go down again. Another positive would be the anxieties that I'd had before, which were quite irrational. Now, in hindsight, there would be things that I'd overthink, or, thoughts that I'd have that just weren't realistic. Now I'm very rational with my anxieties because they are real life threats and real life situations. So I've actually managed to come off all of the medication for anxiety since my treatment. I really wanted to kind of go through the grieving process and really feel what had happened and work through it. And it was just something I couldn't do with the medication. So, and now I still don't take the medication. I just let myself sort of sit with feelings and work through them. So they're all positive sort of side effects of going through that. Stuff that I hadn't expected. I think we all have this picturesque view of what cancer is because you see it on the telly and you see people going through it, and you don't really understand the mental side of things. So the kind of long-lasting fatigue, the brain fog, the memory loss, it's all stuff I hadn't expected to really last to this point, which I still experience it. It's an effect of the chemotherapy, which I understand now. I thought, that's me, I'm done. Hopefully a year later everything will be all finished and I'll be back to normal sort of memory and concentration, but it hasn't quite gone that way. I've got lists everywhere in case I forget something.
Yeah, and it can affect every single part of your life, right? Because it's your brain. Like we take it everywhere. And so that fogginess, that forgetfulness, it can be really disorienting. Like you said, it can be really useful to know what's causing it. Because when you're by yourself feeling it, you feel like you're going crazy. And,
definitely, yeah.
Wondering like what else is going on. Like, is my brain broken, or is it in my brain? Or, your brain can go to all kinds of different places. And I know for you've expressed that numbness that came with kind of just getting through. And then you did something that was quite different to what you would have done maybe before, which was doing a comedy set. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what was going on in your body as you were doing your 5 minutes of stand-up?
So for quite a while after I finished my treatment, I found I still had this complete disconnection that happened on that day of diagnosis, that switch. That was quite long lasting, and it was a disconnection from the mind and body. I just couldn't deeply feel anything. I didn't have feelings of excitement or elation or, that real buzz that you get when something good happens in your life. I just wasn't feeling that. I wasn't getting belly laughs like I used to. So something popped up one day. It was actually for cancer research, and I thought, do you know what? If I fail at this, it's for charity. It's all for a good cause. Like, someone's running out of this, so it's fine. I'll do a little bit of fundraising. I'll see if I can be funny again, and hopefully it will help me bring me back into myself. So I signed up for a 6-week course with a group of really lovely people who I still remain in contact with. They're all some of the funniest people I know, ironically. And I got to week 4 of the course and got a phone call for more surgery. So actually I had to then at that point say, look guys, I can't do the show at the end of the 6 weeks. I don't know how I'm going to recover from this next surgery on my back. And yeah, on the night of the final show, there was around 200 people there, and I went to support the group, and I was sitting in the crowd, and as my friends were getting up on the stage to do their 5-minute sets, I had this burst of energy in me. I was just really wanted to get up on that stage. So I went up to the course leader, and she said, absolutely, we will get you on, no problem. And I quickly looked at my notes on my phone that I hadn't looked at for 2 weeks, jotted down some bullet points in my hand, and took a few deep breaths. And then she called me up on stage, and I managed to hit my 5 minutes flat. I got a load of laughs. And as soon as I stepped off the stage, this huge adrenaline coursed through me. It went through my head and my body, and I thought, that's it. I'm back. That's the mind and body are back in sync here.
Wow.
So that was a real light switch moment again.
Oh, I love that, because so many things happen, and I think dissociation and disconnection are really, really common. And, you know, as part of our bodies kind of keeping us really safe. But then, you know, when we stay in that disconnection for too long, it can really, really start to weigh us down. So finding those moments, and as you were talking, I could feel the adrenaline. I was like, 200 people, you know, you haven't looked at your notes for 2 weeks, you've got it jotted down on your hand. Like, yeah, that release of happy adrenaline can absolutely be the beginning of like bringing yourself back together. Thank you so much, Roisin, for sharing that with us. I'd love to bring Matt in at this point. Matt, how has it been listening to Roisin?
It's massive props for the comedy set, because that's incredible. But yeah, I mean, very, you know, a lot of what Roisin said has been quite relatable, and especially saying about like lists everywhere. God, you know, lists everywhere, all over the place. I think that brain fog and sort of the memory loss and fatigue, long-term effects, very, very relatable. But I can't get over the comedy sets. That's so fun.
And Matt, tell us about what was happening in your life. You were 17 when you were diagnosed.
Yeah, so I was 17 in 2017, and I was at college in my last month of a level 3 BTEC in IT. I got my place at uni confirmed. I was going to go to Liverpool. I was super thrilled, thinking, you know, massive step in my life. Physically, I was pretty worn out. Energy levels were very low. I was coming home from college some days about 1 o'clock in the afternoon and just going straight to bed. I was having a bit of like vision loss and stuff, but I just put everything down to stress and anticipation, anxiety and stuff. But then I was rushed to the eye clinic one day. I'd had all of a sudden one of my eyes drifted to the left and went off a bit, and I had an MRI on the day of the Sheffield Marathon, and very quickly knew something was wrong going for an MRI. And I ended up Googling online thinking, you know, how do I know it's not serious? And the internet told me, as long as the doctor doesn't call back that day, everything should be fine. You're not an emergency case. And it got to 20 to 11 at night. I was just about to go to bed thinking everything's all right. And I got a call from the neurosurgery asking me to come in the next morning to N floor at the hospital. And I know I've said this to many people before, but I thought you said M floor. So I turned up at the hospital the next morning at 7 o'clock and found myself on the maternity ward, very confused.
Matt, that so illustrates that, like, almost getting out of the gate. If I just make it through this day, and then at the last minute. And also just what a new world it is. Like, to know where to go in the hospital, easy mistake to make to end up in maternity, but is all part of this absolute disorientation that happens. So you get brought into the right area, and how long did it take for them to give you your diagnosis?
So initially, they sort of sat me down after a very kind woman from the maternity ward took me up to the correct floor. They sat me down on a bed and said, the MRI sort of shows there's at least one growth in my head. At first, they thought it was a cyst. But then after another couple of scans that day and a few blood tests to rule out other things, sort of sat down with me and my mum and said about 4:00 in the afternoon that I'd got two growths in my head, one on my pituitary, one on my pineal gland, but they wouldn't use the word brain tumours. They wanted to wait until I could have a biopsy to determine the type, if they were tumours, because they weren't sure. But it was pretty much that same day. The doctor did sort of say they probably are brain tumours, but we can't say. But it was all very sort of blasé, just sort of, we think you've got brain tumours, and then we were just left to process that. So
being told that in kind of a blasé way, again, I think that how you hear the information does affect how you're even beginning that processing of it. Like, do you respond in a blasé way? Do you lighten it? Do you where does it go, and how long does that impact last for? Do you feel that you understood at that time that the treatment was going to leave you without a functioning pituitary gland? And did your pineal gland come back on?
So I think I was listening to one of your podcasts you did with, I can't remember which one. It was the LGBTQ one. And I know you're talking to Scott. I think you said about sort of how things are mentioned to patients can totally alter their experience and how they see their own diagnosis. And for me, that was a massive thing because, it was just sort of said, we think you've probably got two brain tumours. When I had the MRI the same day, the last one, the doctor said, would you like to see them? So I went and looked at them, and so I sort of saw my own diagnosis as just like quite ordinary. It wasn't treated as anything major. I think having been in a sort of a spotty place mentally and physically at college, I sort of saw all of a sudden this like life in hospital just being wheeled to appointments and wheeled to treatments and just sitting around. I sort of saw it as a bit of like time off in a way. So it was weird because I saw my own diagnosis as sort of like a good thing rather than what it was, which was a massive life-altering thing. So it's a bit of a difficult one.
Part of seeing it as a good thing, were there some opportunities that came about or some changes that wouldn't have happened? Was that kind of the way that you were attributing it being a good thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sort of that break from education, I thought at 17, oh, this is great. I'm just, once I'm out of hospital in like, hopefully a couple of weeks, just be able to sit at home and do whatever for a while. But I think because I was introduced to different charities and got to do little bits of volunteering, or was in different sort of like, a couple of social media campaigns. I had thankfully a lot of the hospital staff around me were really supportive and, got to know a lot of people. So I felt sort of very looked after and cared for, whereas, pre-diagnosis, I sort of felt quite isolated. So it was very it all those things totally affected how I sort of perceived my diagnosis, and that's how it sort of turned into a good thing for me.
When did the lasting effects and the challenges, the weight of those really start to impact you? And can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the things that you find on a daily basis that you have to adjust for or think more about, or maybe are not able to do?
The ways fatigue impacts me is just with like everything, basically. That's the easy way of explaining it. But it's like, most of all, it probably impacts emotionally, because you sort of inevitably, or I myself at least inevitably, pit myself against people around me and where I am in life and where they are, and compare yourself against friends who are, sort of well and, getting jobs, moving on in life, graduating uni, or, even like buying a house and stuff. And, and then I'm sort of, I'm just at uni going through day to day. I did write down, it feels a little bit like a bit of a race with my own body, because it's like you get up in the morning and some days you feel all right to do something. So I start doing a bit of uni work, go to a class or something. And then after 3 hours, just to the point where you feel you've caught up a bit, then you just crash and then you shatter, you go to bed, you rest, and then it all repeats the next day. And it's just like that day after day after day. So it gets really wearing, and it can, emotionally, it does sort of like really wear you down. And, you can see it affecting the people around you, because they're not sure why it's happening, or they think you're just being a bit lazy. So it gets really difficult, but I constantly have to remind myself, it's like, shouldn't feel bad about it, because it's so easy to fall into that like pit of like self-despair, and that it's my fault. I must be doing something wrong because everyone else is doing so well. That it must be me. But it's not, it's like anyone who suffers from fatigue, it's not, our fault, it's not your fault, but it's an easy thing to fall into. Yeah.
It really is. There's so much guilt and shame that can be attached with fatigue. And in our previous conversation, you had mentioned how it can affect how you see yourself as well as how other people see you. And that interplay between the two as being particularly hard.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like, socially, I think, because of also I take all these different meds for the non-functioning pituitary and everything, and you sort of socially, I know when I started uni is probably a good example that got into a sort of good group of friends, and I hit the point, like a lot of people do with cancer, it's like, do I tell them I've had cancer? And then on top of that, it's like, do I tell them that I have all these lasting side effects? Do I tell them that inevitably I'm going to reach a point where I can't push myself to keep up with them, where I'm going to sort of disappear a bit from daily life at some point? And inevitably some people drop off because it's too much, or they don't know how to respond to it, or, they're just not at a point to, be able to sort of handle someone around them like that. So, yeah, it's sort of, I think it's sort of like a bit like masking, that you sort of try and hide it so much because of the effect it has on those people around you and what that does to your own relationships.
In terms of the medications that you take, I know you have an exhaustive list, so no need to mention all of those, but kind of a sense of, is it daily? Is it self-injections? How much are you involved in monitoring your own levels of, in order to compensate for that pituitary gland?
I'll just quickly shoot off some names. So there's hydrocortisone tablets 3 times a day. There's levothyroxine in the morning. There's desmopressin nasal sprays. There's hydrocortisone emergency injections. There's human growth hormone injections, testosterone injections. and a few other bits on the side. But those sort of, like, all those medications, I'm very much responsible for all apart from the testosterone injections, which has caused some conflict at hospital. But like the emergency hydrocortisone injections, like those play a massive part in like day-to-day life. Because if I'm sick, I need to have one of those. So it's like, do I eat this type of food? I even got to a point where I have to force myself to stop laughing because I get so scared that I'm going to be sick. So it's like they all have a massive effect on you.
That is highly unfair.
Yeah.
Because I can tell that you have a great smile and a great laugh, that to actually be actively thinking, okay, I've got to control this because of what the outcome can be, really shows the extent of what what you're dealing with. And you mentioned in there about the different opinions with the hospital. When you are dealing with long-lasting effects, do you think being able to question your team or do something different than what your team recommends or what the protocol might be, do you feel like there needs to be more conversations about quality of life?
100%, totally, yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, I think like quality of life, it's just not addressed like at all. At least on my end, it was never addressed, and at the endocrine department, it was never addressed to me. Quality of life, side effects from medications were never explained. What medications would physically do to my body were never explained. I think that especially hit hard with testosterone, and that because I hadn't gone through, because all the effects of my brain tumours slowly killing the glands, and because that was happening from a very early age, I sort of never went through a full male puberty. So to go from no facial hair to suddenly being on testosterone and having facial hair appear and having long-lasting sort of gender identity questions, and to not have been told much about those medications beforehand was massively altering to my own sense of identity. And it's only sort of recently that I've been in a place to actually be able to discuss that with doctors, because beforehand I was too ill, and you just believe in doctors. You just go with what they say because you think they have your best interest at heart. And it felt like, for me, looking back on things, that wasn't the case, and that if I hadn't had my mum by my side, I think, I couldn't imagine having to have advocated for myself at 17 in situations about medication. So, yeah.
And Roisin, how is that? I saw you nodding. How was it listening to Matt talk about that?
You've really educated me a lot, Matt.
Thank you.
So many things there that the vast differences, although cancer is just the umbrella term, there's so many things that I would never have thought of. You're incredibly brave, and to be dealing with that every day and taking the tablets every day, and yeah, you've really educated me. I can resonate with a few little points that you made there that I can't resonate with at all, but your mum advocating for you, you said at the end there, although you were quite young as well, 17, but I was 28 and I still needed my mum to advocate for me. That really kind of struck a little nerve with me, because I'm thinking, yeah, she's great, and I'm sure your mum done great for you as well. So that's really lovely to hear that she was there for you. What you mentioned about feeling looked after in the hospital as well, and prior to that you felt quite isolated. That's quite similar to how I felt. as well. So that resonated with me a lot. I actually made friends with quite a few of the nurses, and I was saying to Tatum just the other day that when I finished my treatment, I actually missed them. So I used to go up to the ward and be like, "How are you doing?" Like they're like, "Why are you checking in on us? We're the nurses," Thanks for being so honest as well, and open about your journey. I took a lot from that.
Thank you for being honest about yours. And yes, I totally agree with checking up on nurses and ward staff, because I did the same thing. I felt weird not going up whenever I was in hospital just to check on them.
Yeah, just for the check-up appointments, and then nip up to the ward and be like, "Hello, remember me?"
Oh, that's so lovely to have those relationships during that time, and also, I know having those conversations like that confidence then to have conversations coming from a good place with your team of like, actually, you are the experts in your body, and you know the things that are not working for you or that maybe could be done better, and having that space while keeping those amazing connections. And Roisin, what's one of the things that you advocated for yourself that was a little off label?
Yeah, my doctors wouldn't be too happy with me at that point, and the nurses would be a bit iffy, but again, for sort of 2 or 3 weeks at a time, getting my chemo, and they would generally insist that I stayed in over the weekend to keep an eye on me. I knew that nothing was happening at the weekend. The doctors were all away. Unless there was an emergency, then I wasn't really required to be there. So if I knew my markers were all good, I would discharge myself. And they couldn't really fight with me. They weren't going to say, "Well, you can't come back," So I kind of used that to my advantage. I'd be like, I'd go home for the weekend. I knew that I would recover well in my own space, have my own bed, didn't have doors banging in the corridor or machines going off or buzzers, and the comfort of the home smells and having my mum around me and my family. And I just knew that mentally my recovery was just as important. So it was a bit off. The doctors generally would kind of be wagging their fingers at me, but I'm still here, so it obviously worked for me.
And, I think there is like a sense of where you can taking some control, especially when you see a way that's going to work better for you, to be able to say that and speak up about that. And, I think that doctors aren't always taking on board, gender identity, and they're not always taking on board just how hard it is to sleep overnight in a ward. They don't really realise quite, when you need that sleep desperately. And so I'm really glad for both of you that you were able to kind of find your way with those. And speaking of kind of finding your way, Matt, you had said, like, in the beginning, you kind of looked at it as a positive thing. When did that change in terms of acknowledging that actually this was a really hard thing?
So I think it definitely, there was a definite change, because it's something I thought a bit about, a couple of years after diagnosis, but the massive change was going to uni and going from a system where I was discharged from the cancer hospital and immediately went into sort of different rehabilitation programs or programs about memory loss. And I always had something to do with hospitals, and then going to uni and suddenly being told, there's a deadline for this essay in 3 weeks. You've got classes 3 days a week up until then. You've got to fit your normal life in around it, and hospital appointments, and to not have sort of the people just with an innate understanding of what's going off because they haven't read my 5-book medical record. And it sort of felt like hitting a brick wall, because all of a sudden, because I'd got all these deadlines and stuff going on, and it was such a massive change, and it really sort of shattered my self-identity again, because you sort of, I'd built my identity not purposely, but it'd sort of been built around hospitals, and now all of a sudden that didn't really count for anything. It totally changed my view on my own diagnosis, and I thought, well, it's not really good anymore, because it gave me these opportunities, and in a way it sort of helped me get to uni, but now it's just all negative effects, with work, uni, the people around me. It was all impacting negatively, so that was a massive shift for me.
Oh, that's huge. And so during that time was really a time to kind of find a new almost way of looking at it that kind of integrates the opportunities that you got, but also acknowledges the loss and the grief of the things that other people are doing with a certain amount of ease, that you have so many more considerations on. And I know that you went to the Shine Reset program. Was that a space for you to be able to think about that a little bit more?
No, the Shine Reset program. It was great, because it was a place, I think, like most people said, a lot of people said about Shine, is that it's people who get it. A lot of the stuff we spoke about was that, just between each other, was that how just people didn't understand, and being able to be around people who understood and sort of got what you were going through. And that was incredibly validating, because before it felt like I was just alone, just me going through this. But being around people who got it was a massive difference. And sort of it opened up that path to sort of start thinking about things and processing what happened. And I'm on track to see a therapist come March, to sort of properly go through these things. So it was big change.
I see this with quite a few people that, especially were diagnosed younger, there are different stages of your life that you have different coping strategies. And what can be challenging is not knowing that they might change at some point. At some point, they might stop working, and that there's still support there for you, even if that happens. That, you don't have to be in acute cancer treatment to still get that support. And that's like one of the things that Shine, people have come along years afterwards going, I just hit my wall. And having a place to kind of freely talk about it, and this shit's not easy.
Totally. I think, again, not trying to just push Shine, but I think the fact that, like, even just like the age brackets being so open, 20s to like 40s and stuff. I think you look at younger years charities, and they have like sort of 5 or maybe 10-year age brackets, and it's like, that's fine, but I got out of that 5-year range and my coping strategies were working still. And then 2 years out of that and they weren't. So finding Shine and it being that big open space to sort of work through these things throughout my life and have that support, that's a massive thing. And it's like a big comfort blanket.
Oh, I love that. Oh, excellent. I mean, I'm adding to that big comfort blanket, adding a cup of tea, really nice biscuits, all the things. Roisin, can you share with me what your next adventure is? Because I know you've got some exciting things coming up.
So I, shortly after my treatment, decided to buy a camper van, because I couldn't really book holidays without the sort of threat of another appointment popping up or a surgery just slipping in. So I'd done a little bit of travelling around the west of Scotland, around Ireland, in my camper van, and I loved it so much I decided it was time for an upgrade so I could go further afield when the time was right. So I'd been in touch with some friends who actually own a conversion company, Max and Karen, and they invited me down to Wales to see where they sort of make their units, which are all very kind of next level. I'm an advocate for it, what can I say? But they have this camper van company, Outlandish Campers, and they asked me to jump on board with them. And I sold my old camper van, and I've bought a decommissioned ambulance, like a passenger ambulance, which the irony on the van gave me just yesterday that I spent 3 years in and out of ambulances, and now I have my own.
Again, owning the narrative.
Yeah.
Owning the ambulance.
You know, yeah. So yeah, we're going to be converting this ambulance into a very kind of comfortable, stylish camper van. They've asked me to join the Outlandish Campers family, so I now have the Scottish sister, which is Outlandish. So I've started up a sort of an Instagram page, and it allows people to follow my conversion journey and my adventures that will follow. And it's very useful having a boyfriend who's a great photographer. So I'm not very good at taking pictures or making the content, so yeah, it's good to have him on board as well.
Oh, and you had mentioned that having a boyfriend that's a photographer has also increased your confidence about being photographed.
Generally, I would do sort of silly selfies before all of this, but because I am conscious of the disfigurement on my jaw and my face, I would sort of avoid being in pictures, or if I had to be in a picture, I'd have to be checking to see if I was happy with it, or just generally not very confident in front of the camera. But he's slowly easing me out of that now, and I'm getting there with it. I'm not fully there, but yeah, it definitely brings that out in me a lot more.
And can I ask how you met?
Yeah, so I see it as a bit fateful. That sort of, when you're looking for something you won't find it sort of situation happened. I'd decided to join the dating sort of online world again shortly after sort of getting my hair back and feeling a bit more myself. I wasn't getting anywhere, like many people with the online dating. It's just a bit of a pool you have to try and navigate. I got chatting to him anyway, and we met briefly. He's from a town 2 hours away from where I live, and shortly after connecting, my confidence took a dip again. I just didn't feel it was the right time because he lived 2 hours away. I was thinking of the journey, and yeah, conversation kind of slipped to the wayside. And then just a year later, I went into my local pub for a pub quiz one night. I wasn't even meant to be there. I was meant to be at a friend's house after her engagement, but her plans changed, and I was there with my makeup and all dressed, ready to go, and I messaged a friend and said, "Do you fancy the pub quiz last minute? Come on." So we were sitting in the pub, and this guy walks in, and I recognised him, but I couldn't quite place him. And eventually we got talking, and it turned out it was the guy I'd been speaking to the year previous that I'd met very briefly before, and yeah, we've been together since. So it was a bit of a fateful situation.
Totally. And it's so lovely hearing stories about people meeting their partner after diagnosis. And I love that one. Like that it was a bit like, wrong timing, but then the right pub on the right night, and it all came together. Yeah.
I'd totally given up on the sort of online dating. I was just like, this isn't for me. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So I just kind of given up hope on it. So yeah. You never know what's around the corner.
You really, really don't. And I know lots of people have loads of questions about dating after cancer. And like you were saying, Matt, like, even with friends, like, when do you tell them? How do you tell them? And, all of that complicates what is a normally complicated situation. But this conversation has been so interesting. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing. And if you're out there listening to this, thinking about the lasting effects that you have, and maybe you want a place to get some more support, to feel understood, just go for a drink with a bunch of people that will just nod their heads and say, yeah, we got that. Have a look at shinecancersupport.org. There's loads of information on that website. I want to say a big thank you to my two guests. They're wonderful. And to Radio Facilities for recording us and for supporting us and letting us do what we do. So till next time, bye.
Not Your Grandma's Cancer Show.